On this podcast, we have Zen from Zen Engine, who gives us a lowdown on all the braking components and what all upgrades you can do to make your brakes better.
Hi Zen, welcome to the Motor Asha podcast again.
Hi, pleasure to be here.
So I noticed you had done something, you had done a post on braking and master cylinders and rotors, and I thought, what best? Who best? So we've got you back.
Thank you.
This podcast is about braking upgrades. So I think let's start off with just the basic anatomy, I'd call it. Just the components of a braking system. Just very quickly, and then individually we can get into it then.
Right. So we'll break down the brakes into three major components. You've got your master cylinder, which is the part that you really feel and touch. So that houses the lever, and your brake fluid reservoir. That's all in the master cylinder kit. The second part which actually applies the brake is the caliper, which is on the wheel of the disc, which houses the brake pads as well. And the third part is your plumbing. So your plumbing goes from your master cylinder to your caliper. There may or may not be an ABS pump in the middle, but the lines that flow and your brake lines and your ABS pump is all in the plumbing section. So we'll break it down into those three.
Got it. Cool. So I think the parts are understood. I think the braking part is so much more easier because it's just visibly, you can see the whole thing as anybody can see that. So there's a lot of people who keep asking and they keep complaining about the fact that my bike is not braking well. Where would you start off with?
The first thing that I would do is maintain the brake properly first thing. There is a lot of misinformation about not in terms of the riding group, but in terms of the mechanic groups as well, because mechanics here don't really know how important it is just to flush the brake fluid once a year. And how to properly bleed the system to make sure that all of the air comes out of the system. So that's something which is missing from the mechanic maintenance fraternity. We're trying to get it there as better as I can. The first thing that I would do is make sure that the brake system is very well maintained. So you've got fresh fluids in there. You've got your mechanical systems working properly. You've got a good amount of life left on the brake pads, and they are proper OEM spec brake pads at the very least, and not some cheap knockoffs.
Yeah.
As long as all of that is in place, we know that the brakes are performing as per what the stock level is. Once we know what the stock level is and it is performing as per that, then we can look at, okay, if you're still unhappy, then we will look at upgrades. But the first thing you do is maintain the brakes properly.
Okay. So what is done. So I've got everything maintained. I've done it very religiously. I've been doing it every year. Now I want to take it to the next level, and I should have better braking power.
Right. So the first thing that we do is there are two components of braking that we as a rider understand. The first thing is actual bite. So when you put the brake hard, how much braking performance do you have? That is the first aspect of it. The second aspect of it, which is very important to us as riders, is the braking feedback. So it's the pressure that you feel on the lever. Right? Yeah. So those are your two aspects. Now we look at the thing that, okay, out of these two aspects, what are you looking that is lacking from your riding experience? Is it the actual performance? Do you have enough feedback on the lever, but the bike just doesn't slow down fast enough for you? Or the bike slows down fast enough, but you don't feel anything on the lever. The lever is too mushy, comes too much on the inside, and there's a lot of variance in that. So based on which is your complaint, it can be both also of some motorcycles, but depending on which part of that equation is your complaint, we look at, okay, what do we upgrade here?
Got it. Okay. So let's take the first part that you said, that I'm pressing the lever, but it's not as, the bite is not there. So where do I upgrade on there?
Right. So with upgrades in general, how I do it is you always start from the cheapest upgrade option available and work your way up. Right. So on any motorcycle, the cheapest upgrade for bite is always going to be on the caliper end of the schematic. It's not going to be in the master cylinder end. It's not going to be completely in the plumbing end, part of it probably, but it's always going to be in the caliper end. That's going to have a massive impact in terms of your bite performance, that how hard do my brake pads bite on the disc. So at the caliper end, the cheapest upgrade is your brake pads. Of course, we are assuming that your system is pristinely maintained, you've got good fluid in it and all of that. And your seals and everything are all proper, caliper is working, functioning properly.
Yeah.
Once we assume all of that, then we look at, okay, my brake pads are my first point of upgrade in order to enhance my bike.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm guessing then you get into the kind of quality that is there on the brake pads as double edge, semi-automatic. Are these where I'm going right, or am I going wrong in that?
Right. So this is where companies, the brake pad manufacturing companies, sort of really start to put in their marketing heads down and come up with a lot of nomenclature with different brake pads being labeled with different things. I like to break it down for all of the people listening into three very basic categories. You've got your organic brake pad, which is the age-old technology of soft sort of leather. So in the age-old, it used to be hard leather compressed into brake pads, right?
Yeah.
And the other end of the spectrum is sintered brake pads, which are metal sintered brake pads. So you use really soft metal bits and sort of compress them into a brake pad. That process is called sintering, which is why it's a sintered brake pad. And then you've got a mixture of two in between, which is called a semi-sintered brake pad. So you've got the organic compound, but you've got some sort of sintered metal pieces in there, and it is compressed via the sintering method. So, but it's an organic compound. So you've got a semi-sintered. We like to break it down into three very simple, broad categories for the people to understand. I don't really care what the company calls it. Some companies have a good nomenclature system, but some companies are, really, so there are these ceramic brake pads and this and that, so it gets really confusing.
Yeah.
But if you break it down into those three, so we then figure out what brake pads are you running. Are you running organic brake pads? Okay, let's upgrade you to semi-sintered brake pads and see how you like it.
Got
You
it.
still lack a little bit of performance? Okay, let's upgrade you to fully sintered brake pads, see how you like that.
Yeah.
Now, in each of these categories of brake pads, there will be different compounds. Just like with tires, you've got off-road, road, track, and in each of those categories, you've got different compounds.
Yeah.
Similar in brake pads, in each of those categories, you've got different compounds. Once you go into fully sintered brake pads, then you've got track compounds, you've got carbon ceramic brake pads, and all of that. But to keep it very simple for the road rider, you've got three basic divisions of brake pads. You want to upgrade, you want to go from the organic towards the sintered, choose which level fits your budget, and try that brake pad.
Cool. So I've got the brake pads done. Do I need to change anything else after that if it is still not to my liking, or do you think that is probably a very a good place to be at for the street rider?
Right. So then we will move on to your plumbing, because plumbing makes a big difference in terms of feedback, but a little bit different also in terms of the biking performance. Very simple thing to understand in plumbing, you've got two types of brake lines which are commonly used. You've got a lot of others as well, but let's stick to two. You've got your rubber brake lines, which are big fat rubber brake lines which come stock in a lot of motorcycles. And you've got steel braided brake lines, right? Everyone has heard of these.
Yeah.
Now, what you need to understand is when you apply pressure on the lever, it pushes fluids and applies the same pressure on the brake pads, which applies pressure on the disc, which makes your bike stop.
Yeah.
Now, if I've got a rubber line, that rubber line has a tendency to expand. It's very strong, it's not going to break or anything, but it can still expand a very tiny amount. And when it expands, it takes away a little bit of the energy that you are applying on the lever that the fluid is carrying.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? So, after my brake pads, my brake lines are going to be my second cheapest upgrade in terms of adding performance.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? So if I'm running rubber brake lines and in the maintenance segment of that as well, rubber brake lines, any rubber part on your motorcycle have a fixed life. So rubber brake lines, every 4 to 5 years, you have to replace them.
Yeah.
So if your motorcycle is 5 years old, you're running a rubber brake line, irrespective of whether you're happy with the performance or not, you have to change the brake lines.
Yeah. And does the steel braided line require that kind of maintenance of the replacing, or does it?
As long as it does, as long as there's no rust on the steel braided lines or there's no physical visual appearance of damage on it, as long as that's not there, it should last you pretty much a lifetime.
Got it. Okay, so you've got the steel braided lines. I'm sure the fluid has to be also, there's upgradable fluids. I mean, I've been reading a lot about what can you put in replacement to a dot 4. So
So that comes in your feedback segment. Your actual fluid, as long as it's in good condition, does not really change how much bite your brakes have, but it makes a drastic difference in terms of feedback.
got it.
So in terms of the bike segment, we have a final upgrade, which is the actual caliper. So if you've got a floating piston axially mounted caliper, you can always upgrade them you can try to upgrade it to a radial, or you can try to upgrade it to a monoblock caliper, which will give you way more performance, but it is very expensive once you get into those segments.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm going to go back to the point that you made on the brake pads. It's a question we also get asked a lot, and I see a lot of WhatsApp groups discussing, hey, I'm going to put double H. Is it going to eat my rotor? I mean, I know what our standard answer is, but what would you tell somebody who would ask you that question? I'm sure there'd be somebody who would ask you that question.
I get this question a lot of times, and the problem is that it is really blown out of proportion. That the amount of wear that your discs go through because of different brake pads, it is really blown out of proportion. Because what happens is, generally when someone realizes that, okay, my discs are worn down, and they go and try to get new discs. The discs are not cheap. They are expensive. And when they realize that, okay, I can now suddenly spend this much, and then they start thinking, okay, what did I do wrong? And then, that is how that whole chain of thought flows. When we get to statistics, your sintered brake pads are a little bit more harsh on your disc than your organic brake pads, no question about it. But the point I'm trying to make here is, how much harsher is it really? Are you telling me that within 5,000-10,000 kilometers, my brand new discs are going to wear down just because I'm putting sintered brake pads?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, boss. You are absolutely mistaken there.
Yeah.
The maximum amount of difference that you can have is a 10%, maximum worst case scenario is a 10% increase in rotor wear. So if you assume an average rider who rides an average 600cc motorcycle, if his discs are going to last about 1 lakh kilometers, which is a good number for an average rider, someone who does not brake very aggressively, his disc, if he constantly uses sintered brake pads, his discs will probably wear down at 90,000 kilometers. But they're certainly not going to wear around 50,000 kilometers.
Yeah.
The misconception is that when riders who are really aggressive on the brakes. So I've had a client who has come in with completely worn down sintered brake pads in 3,000 kilometers. Right? And that was really surprising to me. But then he always rides with a pillion. He rides a Z800, he always rides with a pillion. The combined weight on the motorcycle is almost 200 kilos with both the riders on. And I went and I spoke to the pillion, and I asked the pillion, okay, how do you think he brakes? And the pillion's reply was very aggressively, he's always hard on the brakes. I'm like, okay, that explains it. There's nothing wrong with the braking system. You put 200 kilos on a motorcycle, you brake aggressively, your brake pads are going to wear down in 3,000 kilometers, no question. And with that same rider, the disc is also going to wear down in 45,000 kilometers.
Yeah. So we've got a very funny answer that we tell people. If you're gonna wear sports shoes and keep scraping them on the road a lot more, they go.
Correct.
Not even that. We tell people that if you're wearing walking shoes and if you're running hard on them, you're going to lose your soul for sure. But
for sure.
I think there's a myth. I think is the biggest myth that I've seen. Not even that. I've actually stood at a garage and seen somebody come in and say, hey, I lost my disc rotor in 8,000 kilometers. And we looked at him, the guy looked at him, and he asked him, what kind of shoes are you wearing he was riding a street naked. And he asked him what kind of shoes. So this guy was actually wearing boots with, an inch and a half heels and, sole which was so thick. And he didn't realize that all he was doing was putting his feet on the, and just riding the bike like that.
Riding the brake,
Riding the brake. And, as much as we sell double H, sintered, fully sintered, we agree that, it's like it eats some part of your rotor, yes. But that's because you can use those brake pads really aggressively. And you don't need to brake so much more harder. So what we realize is when people move from an organic to a double H, they start using the levers as much as they would on an organic also. They jam the whole thing down inside. come to the dead stop. And we keep telling
Right.
them, it's like something's going to wear. You can't just
Yeah.
use it. But no, I think that's a big, deep answer that we have just on breakfast. But so good. I mean, I'm glad that you've brought that up. It's 10%. 10% higher wear, and then that again depends on how you're going to use your brakes also. So
Absolutely.
yeah, cool. So we've got that. I think we've covered the part of the caliper bit that you've come up with. So what is the other part of the upgrade that you are coming into?
Right. So the other part of the upgrade, like we discussed, is the feedback section as to what you feel on the lever in terms of your master cylinder, right? It's very important for us to have a good feel on the lever because it gives our mind a lot of sense of security. You know, if you go and grab a lever and it just goes all the way in, it doesn't give you a lot of sense of security, right?
Yeah.
If you have to really grab onto the brake lever, so I'm assuming on the front brake lever here, if you really have to grab on the front brake lever and you have to apply a lot of pressure, you have to keep in mind that you're technically grabbing the handlebar while you're doing that, which inputs a steering input into your motorcycle every time you do it. Every time I ride a motorcycle which has a very weak master cylinder, I have a hard time braking and turning, right? Because every time I'm hard on the brakes, for me to be able to turn, it becomes very difficult because I'm constantly applying a steering input on the steering.
Yeah.
Right? So now if we think about, okay, what can we do in terms of feedback? In terms of rider complaints, what I get is my lever feels very mushy, it feels very spongy and a lot of inconsistency. So sometimes it will break, it will bite properly and sometimes the lever will come in all the way, keeps changing. There's no consistency in the feeling. All of these are complaints that we get. Again, in the same thing, what we do is we look at the cheapest upgrade available. The cheapest upgrade available is your brake fluid. You've got two types of brake fluid, right? You've got one which is your dot 3 and dot 4 and the other one which is your dot 5, right? They are two different brake fluids. They cannot be mixed together. Dot 5 brake fluid was developed for American military vehicles because they stand in sheds for a long amount of time until a war is called. So they last a long amount of time. And dot 3, dot 4 is what is used on majority of our motorcycles. Now, here we come to the other fluid which can be used with dot 3 and dot 4, but I don't know what the people were thinking when they went ahead and named it.
Yeah.
This is called dot 5.1.
Yeah.
It is called dot 5.1, but it cannot be mixed with dot 5. It can only be used with dot 3 and dot 4.
Yeah.
Right? So that fluid, the only difference between all of these three fluids, so dot 3, dot 4 and dot 5.1, we'll ignore dot 5 because it is not irrelevant to us, except a very old Harley motorcycle. Some of them use dot 5, but that is pretty much irrelevant to 99% of the people listening.
Yeah.
So dot 3, dot 4, dot 5.1, what are the differences between them? The only difference comes in the boiling point of the fluid. Why do we care about the boiling point? Because when you brake, you create a lot of friction, you create a lot of heat. Your caliper gets very hot, you put a lot of pressure into your brake fluid. Your brake fluid gets very hot because of that pressure, right? When your brake fluid starts to, if any fluid boils, it turns into a gas, correct?
Yeah.
A gas, the state of gas is compressible and a state of liquid is not compressible. So now if I've got gas in my brake line, when I'm pressing my lever, my gas is just going to compress and not pass forward that force onto my brake pipes.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So the difference is in boiling point. So different fluids have different boiling points. So dot 3 is the lowest, dot 4 is a bit higher, and dot 5.1 is the highest. Again, in all of these, you've got different fluids. So in dot 4, you've got some racing brake fluids like the Maxima 600 series that I use a lot on my motorcycle. That 600 series boiling point is technically higher than a dot 5.1 standard brake fluid, believe it or not.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? So those are your differences in terms of boiling point, and that is your first stage upgrade that you do.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So apart from this, is there anything else? Or is there? I mean, I know where you're going. Is that the next one is an expensive upgrade? But what is it?
Right. So the next space of upgrade is like we discussed in the first segment also, are again your brake lines. So if you've got rubber brake lines which sort of expand like we talked about, they are going to take away a lot of your feedback and a lot of your performance in that. So if you've got rubber brake lines, that is your second upgrade, which is again not very expensive, but still a little bit definitely more expensive than just your brake fluid. So that is step 2 that you do. After that, which is very, very close third, is depending on what upgrade you choose in terms of cost, it's going to be coming very close to it, is your actual master cylinder. So the one thing that I notice a lot, people doing a lot are, just upgrade the brake lever to a shoddy one and, run with that. And worst case scenario, they upgrade to a knockoff brake lever. That is not really going to make a lot of difference in your braking performance. You are going to put in more effort through your fingers because it's a shorty lever and you don't have the same leverage as the big lever. But in terms of actual stopping power, it's not doing anything.
Yeah.
Right? In your master cylinder, then you've got different brands and different variety of upgrades available, but changing to radial master cylinder makes a massive difference.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think that covers the braking part. I have one question though, and I was actually having a chat with somebody at a service station again, and the technician actually told me that these people who put these short levers, it's not the right way to go because it doesn't have enough leverage to pull the clutch in and pull the clutch back out. Does that make any sense, or do you think we're going wrong?
Yes, it does. It does. So I have noticed this a lot with knockoff levers at the garage, where people come in with worn out clutch plates, and a lot of them have these shorty levers which are really knockoff, and they don't have they have a lot of play in them. They've got like a million joints in them for you to be able to adjust them at different lengths. But what I have noticed is with 99% of them, I have to set them to the maximum out setting, and even then you're not completely pressing the clutch. So you pull the clutch and put the bike in gear, and the bike is going to push you forward.
Okay.
Which means that the clutch plates are constantly rubbing. So that is definitely a problem with the clutch plates that I face.
Yeah. So I mean, basically, well-made, even levers, they're engineered, and that's what you're paying for. That's what you're saying.
Yep.
Yeah, I think the general consensus always is the fact that it's just a lever. But I mean, when you come to the premium stage of motorcycling, you realize that everything is made with a lot of thought and knowledge and these things. So I think that's where we go wrong, and I think that the whole market should change and people should start.
Yeah. So the one thing that I would like to put out is you are riding a motorcycle and brakes are a safety critical item.
Yeah.
So anything on your motorcycle which is a safety critical item should not be messed with.
Yeah.
If you don't want to upgrade it, make sure that you maintain it correctly and make sure that you don't fudge around with components of a safety critical item.
Got it.
There are knockoff master cylinders available of a Brembo RCS 19 Corsa Cota. I don't know how reliable it is. I would never recommend it to a friend, but I know people who have installed it.
Yeah.
Believe it or not.
Yeah. I've got to leave it there. There's a lot of that happening in this market. But you're right though. I think the half-baked knowledge is where we're going wrong. And I think I'm glad we have people like you who keep putting the word out there. Yeah, so it's good.
Thank you so much.
Great. Is there anything else that we should know of the whole braking system, or if there's anything that is an upgrade that you still think, this is, because I know the series of what we should be doing to get there, and we've blown some myths away as well. Is there anything else that you want to put out there?
Right. So I don't think there is anything more in terms of products or technical upgrades that you can do. There are a couple of hacks, and one of them is generally very common in the track scene, where what people do is it's called an ABS delete.
Okay. Yeah.
So you've got your motorcycle which has an ABS system, and we will take the prime example of a CBR 1000RR Fireblade 2012 to 15 model. I had the horrific pleasure of installing master cylinder and caliper and brake line kit on that motorcycle. Absolutely dreaded it because it's got 3 ABS pumps and a million bleed nipples, and it all has to be done in a very particular fashion.
Okay. Yeah.
So there's this thing called as an ABS delete. When you're at the racetrack, you don't really want ABS, especially with the pro riders, so they don't use ABS.
Okay.
If you imagine a brake ABS unit somewhere in your motorcycle, your brake lines have to go from your master cylinder to that ABS unit and from that ABS unit to your caliper. That's a lot of plumbing, that's a lot of fluid, that's a lot of joints where air and water can get in the system.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's a lot of place for fluid to expand and lose energy, right? So at the racetrack where ABS is not really important and the pro riders don't really, need the ABS, what they do is they remove the ABS unit, they take a direct brake line from your master cylinder straight to your caliper.
Got it.
I'm making it very clear, this is not I recommend if you are a road rider. I don't care how good you think you are in terms of your brakes, you always need the safety net of an ABS system on the road.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
You might think you are Marquez, but boss, our roads are not the racetrack. Our road is not a Valentino Rossi ranch. It's a combination of two.
Yeah.
And you don't know when the road is when your Mugello street circuit is going to convert into a Valentino Rossi ranch.
Got it. I think that's a very interesting way to put it out there, because you're right though. Once you get, even people as many years that I've ridden also, now if you give me a non-ABS motorcycle to ride on the street, I'm scared.
Yep.
You can't, you're not able to figure it. But if you're an old school, I believe that if you're an old school and never ridden an ABS motorcycle, you might be able to survive.
Yeah. Yeah, you might be able to definitely, but it's always very good to have the safety net. So in the age old when ABS was new and you had this very clunky ABS system where if it noticed the brake slipping, it would just violently rob you of all the braking power and the bike would just destabilize and all of that. In that aspect, I would understand that, okay, it's a very abrupt system and sometimes it triggers when I don't really want it to. But with the modern systems, like I was riding the Pani Gali the other day, you just don't feel it.
Yeah.
The ABS is kicking in, but you just don't feel it as a rider.
Yeah. But I think one of the things that I learned from one of the garages was to be able to slow down the pulses on the ABS, so you can it's not kicking in as often as you really want it to be, and there are a lot of people who do that as well. Programming through a program, they slow it down, the pulse rates.
It can be done. When I think of something like this, my thought process goes towards, okay, I don't know how the company has programmed the software of the ABS system.
Got it.
Right? Technically, it can be done. Yes, you're slowing down the pulse rate and you're slowing down the reaction time, right? But it can also mean that in one offbeat scenario, you will have something like my ABS just kicked in, went off, kicked in again, went off, kicked in again.
Yeah.
That is one sort of possibility which can happen.
Yeah.
Again, safety critical item, I don't like to mess with it.
And I don't know what you want to do it for.
Exactly.
But yeah, no, cool. So I think we've got all the info that we could get out of you for the braking. Thanks again, Zen. I think you're always
most welcome. Thank you for having me.
A bundle of knowledge for all of us.
Thanks for listening to this podcast. I want to hear your stories, your motorcycle experiences, what you've been doing, and how motorcycles have made your life better. So if you have something to say, DM us on Instagram, and I'll be more than happy to get you on this podcast.